Okay, here's the homework graphing standard equations. In this one, we're just trying to go through and find alternative ways to graph different equations. The best way to do this is to remember, hey, let's just block this out and make y 0. Well, when y is 0, we see that x equals 2. So when y is 0, x equals 2. Now, if you see, all I'm doing is just plugging in a 0 there, and I'm saying, okay, what x minus 0 is just x, and x equals 2. So now let's switch over to the other side and say, okay, negative y equals 2. Well, we can't have a negative y, so I'm going to change the sign on that one and that one. If you change the sign on everything, you're just fine. So now we have y equals negative 2, and we've got a point there. Now that we have 2 points, we just simply draw the line and move on. Okay, so number 2. And I'll zoom in so you can see it a little better. All right, once again, let's cover up the y. And we see 3x equals 6. Okay, 3x equals 6. Well, to get that, we need to divide by 3. Divide by 3, now we have x equals 2. So when we change y to 0 and all that goes away, x is 2. So we put a point right there. Now let's cover up the x, and we see negative 2y equals 6. So we're going to divide by negative 2y. So we're going to divide by negative 2y, or excuse me, by negative 2, not the y, and divide by negative 2, and we see that y is negative 3. So we see our y equals negative 3. Okay, so we put a point right there. When we turned x to 0, y was right there, and now we can graph that. Okay, number 3. 4x minus 3y equals 0. Now the trick here is if I divide 0 by anything, so if I cover up the y and solve 4x equals 0, divide by 4, that's going to be 0. And same if I do the other one, negative 3 divided by negative 3, so 0 divided by negative 3 is also 0. That doesn't tell me anything. This is one of those times where you need to actually convert it into the slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. So we know our y-intercept, and more importantly, we know our slope. Okay. Well, we know what the y-intercept is. It's 0. We figured that out by making x 0, and that gave us that. But we need to find the slope. So we're going to minus 4x, because in this version up here, we don't have any x's on the left. But whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So now that goes away, and I'm left with negative 3y equals, and I want the x first, right? So negative 4x and then plus 0. We still have the 0 there. Now I'm going to divide by negative 3, divide by negative 3, and divide by negative 3. That goes away, leaving me with just y equals, okay, and we have negative 4 and negative 3, so those negatives cancel out, and we just have 4 over 3x, and 0 divided by negative 3 is plus 0. So now we have up 4 and over 3. We have our slope, rise over run, and we can just graph that line now. Sometimes it's easier to just move it or change it into slope-intercept form. Number 4. Okay, we don't have a 0 here, so let's just cover up the y and say, okay, we have 2x equals 4. All right, to get that, we're going to divide by 2, divide by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Okay, so I just divided by 2, and I did it to both sides. Okay, now we'll cover the x, and we have negative y equals 4. So we need to change that sign, y equals negative 4. So we have our x and our y. Our y is negative 4, so we're going to put a point right on negative 4 on the y-axis. X is 2. We're going to put a point right on the 2. And there's our line. Number 5. In number 5, we have something slightly different. If we cover up the y, we have 5x equals 4. Okay, 5x equals 4. Well, we're going to divide by 5 and divide by 5. But the problem is what's 4 divided by 5? That's not something I know off the top of my head. So we're just going to use a calculator. 4 divided by 5 is 0.8. Okay, so now we see x equals 0.8. So that's almost at 1. It's about right there. Okay, so we're just going to put a point there. Now let's cover up the x. And we see negative 2y equals 4. So we're going to divide by a negative 2 on both sides. Divide by a negative 2, divide by a negative 2, and we see that y is negative 2. Okay, because 4 divided by negative 2 is negative 2. And we now have our second point. So we can just get a ruler and say that's our estimate of the graph. And it's pretty close. It's definitely close enough. Okay. Number 6. Problem here is that it ends in a 0 again. So now we have to convert it to the y equals mx plus b format, the slope intercept form. So let's go ahead and subtract the 4x because we can't have it on this side. And that leaves us with 3y equals, and we had to subtract 4x from both sides, negative 4x plus 0. We're going to divide by 3, and we have y equals negative 4 thirds. And we divided this by 3 too, I'm sorry. But it's still 0, because 0 divided by 3 is 0. Okay, so now we know the y-intercept is right here. That's that number. And our slope, which is right before the x, is down 4, positive 3. And we can draw our line. And that's how you do number 6. If we flip over to number 7, okay, does not end in 0, so we can just do the standard thing here. And we get 9x equals 5, so we got to divide by 9. 5 divided by 9, again, we'll just use the calculator. 5 divided by 9 is 0.55 repeating. So I'm just going to round that up to 0.6. X equals 0.6. Okay, and I got that just by using the calculator, 5 divided by 9. Now, let's find y. When we cover the x, we get negative y equals 5. So let's change the sign of both of those. And we get y equals negative 5. So our y is negative 5. And our x is about a half, 0.6. We have 2 points. We can simply draw the line. Okay. Number 7. Does not end in a 0, so let's cover up the y. We have 2x equals negative 9. Well, I don't know what negative 9 divided by 2 is, so let's use the calculator. Negative 9 divided by 2 is negative 4.5. So x equals negative 4.5. Now let's cover up the x. And we see 3y equals negative 9. So we divide by 3 both sides, and we see that y is negative 3. Because we're just saying, okay, we're going to divide by 3, negative 9 divided by 3 is negative 3. So y is negative 3, and x is negative 4.5. So we're just going to go through and put that there. Number 9. In this one, doing the same thing. Going to cover up the y. We get 3x equals negative 10. So negative 10 divided by 3 is negative 3.3. So that's x. And our y, negative 10 divided by negative 2 is 5. So y is 5, x is negative 3.3. And we have our line. And the last one of this section, number 10, doesn't end in a 0, so we can cover up the y and say, all right, 2x equals 5. So 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. So x equals 2.5. And that's all we're doing. It's just saying, we got to get the x by itself. So we're going to divide by the 2 to get the x by itself. And over here, we have 5y equals 5. So y equals 1. Because if we divide by 5, we get those go away, and y equals 5 divided by 5, which is 1. So x is 2.5, y is 1, and we have our line. Now, 11 through 15 is a little different in the fact that it gives you a system of equations. With the system of equations, don't try to solve the whole thing all at once. Just do one equation at a time. Okay? So if we cover up the rest and just start with 1, we see, okay, x equals negative 2. Well, we don't even have to do anything there. We can say x equals negative 2. And if we cover the x, we see 2y equals negative 2. So when we divide by 2, we get y equals negative 1. So now x is negative 2, y is negative 1. We're going to go ahead and draw that. Okay. Now we're done with that one. We don't need that one anymore, so we're just going to look at the other one. When we cover up the y, we have 5x equals 6. So we need to know what 6 divided by 5 is. So 6 divided by 5, I'll just do it on the calculator, is 1.2. So our other line, we have x equals 1.2. So all we're doing is dividing by 5, and then I just do that right there on the calculator. Now we have the 2y and the 6. If we cover up the 6, or the x, excuse me, we have 2y equals 6. That tells us that y equals 3. So we have a point here and a point at 1.2. When you draw the line, you see they come together right here at 3, negative 3. Oh, I guess you can't see. I was too low. When you draw the line, they come together right here at this point, and that point is 3, negative 3. Okay. Number 12. Okay, once again, don't try to solve it all at once. We're just going to start with that one. When we cover up the y, we see x equals negative 6. So our first line, x equals negative 6. And when we cover up the y, or excuse me, the x, we see that at 2y equals negative 6. So when we divide by 2, we get y equals negative 3. Okay, now the next one, when we cover up the y, we get 4x equals 4. So to clear the, get the x by itself, we divide by 4. So 4 divided by 4 is 1. Now we have y equals 4. And we have our two lines. With those two lines, we see y equals negative 3. And that equals negative 6. Okay, we can't really go there, so we have to find the slope for this one. Okay, well, to find the slope, just draw a fraction bar and change the sign on the top one. You have 3 over 6. That simplifies down to negative 1/2. Okay, because 3 goes into 3 once, 2 goes into 6 twice, and it's still a negative. So we can do that now. We can go down 1 over 2, down 1 over 2, and we see our line starting to form. And we could see that as we draw the line, it would have gone over to about 6, so we're pretty close. Okay, so that's when it's important to find the slope. After you've plotted the points, draw a line, fraction bar, and change the numerator, and then simplify, and that's your slope. Now we have y equals 4 and x equals 1, so 4 and 1. And as we draw the line, we can see right where they come together, right here. So the answer is 2 comma negative 4. Okay, 2 comma negative 4, because that's the coordinates where it comes together. So 2 and down to negative 4. Okay, all right, 3 left. Number 13. Number 13, same thing. We've just got to solve each equation individually. And we say, all right, cover up the y. We get x is 4 over 5, or excuse me, 5x equals 4. So when we divide by 5, we get x is 4 over 5, which is about 1, just under 1. So x is going to be right around there. And you can use a calculator to find out that 4 over 5 is 0.8, so it's about that. Okay, and if we cover up the x, we see y equals 4. So y equals 4. We can put a point there. So we see our first line. And let's go ahead and look at the next line. When we cover up the y, we see x equals 2. And when we cover up the x, we see negative y equals 2. So we're going to change that to a positive y and a negative 2. Remember, the variable always has to be positive. So x equals 2 and y equals negative 2. And we have some lines. So if we draw this line, and then we draw this other line, we see that they come together right here, which is at about 1, negative 1. So that's the answer, 1 comma negative 1. And number 14. When we just work the top one, we see x equals negative 12. And now let's solve for y. Y equals a negative 3. Okay, I can't graph the negative 12. My graph doesn't go that far, but I can do the negative 3 right here. Now I just need to find the slope. To find the slope, just draw the line, change the sign of the x, and I have 3 over 12. Let's factor 3 over 12, or simplify it. 3 is a prime number, so that doesn't change. 12 is 3 times 4, which is 2 times 2. So our numerator is 3. Our denominator is 3 times 2 times 2. The 3's cancel out, giving us just a 1 up here, and then 2 times 2 is 4. So 1/4 is our slope, simplified down. So we see, but there's the negative right here by the 12. So we see the slope is negative 1 over 4. So that means we go down 1 over 4, or up 1, negative 4. Okay, and we start to see a line form, so now we can just get a ruler and draw our line. Now the next equation, we see x minus y equals negative 2. When we cover up the x, or the y, excuse me, we get x equals negative 2. Okay, so I'll put that over there. And when we cover up the x, we get negative y equals negative 2. So I need to change the sign of both of those. Y equals positive 2. So when when y is 0, x is negative 2, and y is a positive 2. And I can already see kind of where those are going to come together. It lines up perfectly with that other circle right there. And I can say, all right, the solution for this is negative 4, comma, negative 2. And the last one, number 15. When we cover up the y, we get 7x equals 6. So that means that x equals 6 divided by 7. 6 divided by 7 is 0.85, so I'm just going to say 0.9. And when we cover up the x, we get negative 2y equals 6. So when we divide by negative 2, we see that y equals negative 3. Okay, now let's do the same thing for this one. X equals negative 6. And when we cover up the x, we get negative 2y equals negative 6. So we divide by a negative 2, and we get positive 3. So y equals 3. Now we have our two lines, line A and line B. I put those close together, so I'll circle them so they're separate. First one, negative 3 for the y, 0.9 for the x. So it's right there near 1, but not quite 1. I'll go ahead and draw that line. This one, y is 3, and x is negative 6. I can't go to negative 6, so I need to convert that into slope. So I change the top number, and I have negative 3 over negative 6, which equals just 3 over 6, which is the same thing as 1/2. Okay, the negatives cancel each other out, and we're left with just 1/2. So the slope is 1/2, which means I go up 1 over 2, and I can see right there's where they cross. This one keeps going. So right there at 2, 4. And I know it can get long and it can get confusing, but try not to overthink it. Just try to solve it step by step. But that's how you do the homework.